Governor Gretchen Whitmer speaking for roughly 30 minutes. Her State of the State, of course, COVID modified as she was speaking from the ceremonial room in the Capitol. COVID dominated that speech as she said that the state of the state is resilience.
She does talk a lot about resilience. She does talk a lot about bipartisan efforts moving forward. We do have extended coverage as well as analysis tonight. Let's get to News 8 political reporter Rick Alvin first. And Rick, what are your initial thoughts on all this?
Well, I think it's very much what we expected it to be. We had a lot of talk about what happened with the COVID response here in the state over the last year. She singled out a number of very important groups of people, like those on the front lines in the medical field, and thanked them and talked about that. That was all something we expected that she would include in this. She talked about her COVID recovery plan. That's that $5 billion+ plan that she introduced recently. We knew she was going to focus on that, and she urged the legislature to get that passed and get it passed quickly. We knew, too, that she was going to talk about working together, and she expanded that even further, not just with the legislature, but towards the end of the speech. She talked about how she felt there was a need to try to somehow get some unity, and that she is going to go on a tour, I believe she called it, Fixing the Damn Road Ahead. And she's going to go around and talk to people all around the state. She says she wants to find common ground so they can start having that conversation. In just a few minutes, we're going to have part of that conversation with a couple of legislators and get their take on that. But here's the takeaway. The governor talked a lot about what happened over this past year, and she did not talk greatly about the divisions between the legislature and the this administration. We know that there's still some real pushback there about the governor using executive orders for months before the Supreme Court said she couldn't use them, then using the Department of Health and Human Services. The legislature, the Republican-led legislature, has said that they feel like they have not been included in some of the response on COVID. We're going to get a take on that. She didn't mention much of that within the text of this speech, but it's all there underlying, and that's why there were those repeated actions where she was saying, we've got to come together, we've got to work together. At one point she pointed out it was a non-election year, so maybe they could find some bipartisanship. And I think that that was probably the big takeaway tonight. Obviously, once this COVID plan passed, she needs the legislature to do it, and she called a number of times tonight on more unity between the legislature and the governor's office. So, what are the odds on that happening? Well, we're going to talk to two members of the state Senate. We will talk in just a few minutes to Senator Sean McCann from Kalamazoo, but first we're going to start with Senator Aric Nesbitt of Lawton. He is in Lansing this evening. Senator, you listened to that speech, as we all did. Give me your first take.
Well, the State of the State address, the governor outlined her plan and called on the legislature to work with her. And we've tried over the last 2 years to work with the governor. We tried passing tax relief for small businesses that have been forced to shut down, no fault of their own, by this governor, struggling during this pandemic, and help people who lost their job to no fault of their own. And she vetoed those pieces of legislation last year. Really common sense pieces of legislation, but this is really nothing new for Governor Whitmer. She's chosen the go-it-alone approach. Remember, to start off with, she demanded a 45-cent per gallon gas tax increase, nearly $3 billion of higher taxes on taxpayers here in the state, 40% increase on small business owners. And we've seen this throughout this pandemic, is that, again, this go-it-alone approach of not working with the legislature to secure PPE, to secure testing supplies. And again, we just saw her Health and Human Services Director resign last week in disgrace after a failed rollout of the vaccine. West Virginia, South Dakota, Alaska are all doing a lot better than Michigan is.
What is the current relationship between the legislature and the governor? Is there a place to build a cooperation between these two groups? I mean, let me say that against the backdrop of what happened today. There were those 13 nominations for commissions and boards that I believe you yourself recommended be rejected, and part of that is in response to what you as a group want the governor to do on COVID. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just zero communication from the legislature. You have to remember, going back to even April, she said the legislature was a non-essential part. That means every one of our constituents throughout the state are saying that your voice doesn't matter in the legislature. The Supreme Court last fall said, you know what, it does. The legislature does have a role in this. And we went ahead and actually passed a strong bipartisan budget package that extended unemployment benefits, helped out small business owners, and she vetoed large components of that back in December without much communication, any communication with the legislature. I hope that we see the reopening, the safe reopening of businesses. We see high school sports back in terms of the play, that our kids are back in school learning. It's been a tragedy, the amount of hours, and I appreciate her mentioning it, the amount of hours that the students have been outside the classroom. And I hope, as I salute the teachers and the frontline workers, that we need to get all the students back to make sure that they're educated, and especially those elementary kids, the K through 5, that it's just such an important age to make sure they have the basics available to them and taught to them. So it's really, we need students back in school, playing sports. We need to get vaccines in people's arms. We need a healthy, strong, growing economy that without higher taxes and a bunch of government regulations.
Senator, we are at a point where there are new strains of this COVID virus that are being identified. It is said, no medical expert am I, but by those medical experts, that these may be more easily transmittable, and that means that more people could be getting sick. Are you convinced that we're at a point where it's really safe to further engage the economy, reopen schools, have sports being played on a broader basis at a time when some medical experts are warning that we could see a bigger spread?
Michigan has one of the highest death rates in the Midwest because of the governor's nursing home policies throughout the last year. We got to remember, half of all the deaths happen in long-term care facilities that the governor was putting them in. The legislature passed 2 laws last year prohibiting that. She vetoed both of them. As we go in with this new strain, you're right. Fortunately, early effects show the vaccine is effective against them. That is why it is so important. I salute the folks in Kalamazoo and West Michigan that have been on the front lines producing this vaccine. What a wonderful time to be alive. To see 9 months of a rollout in the vaccine. But you look at other states and the flailing that happened in the response here in Michigan, when you have states like West Virginia, South Dakota, Alaska just running laps around Michigan and getting the shot in the arm. This is something, it's a lesson throughout the last year where the governor has closed down private businesses instead of challenging them to do the right thing and to challenge them to help fight this virus together. And as you look at it, you got to challenge the people to do the right thing at the end of the day. We're free people, and we need to have the information and the truth that's out there. And a lot of us will make those right decisions to make sure we socially distance, we wear masks, we go ahead and limit our social gatherings and our family gatherings. We're not seeing the big spread at work and at institutions. Where we're seeing the spread at is through social interactions that people make, of outside of those places. So it's not about shutting down the economy. It's about opening up the economy and challenging people to do those safe things of mask usage, of washing your hands, of going ahead and making sure we get the vaccine out into people's arms. And again, these nursing homes, they're still on waiting lists. And yet West Virginia has had every nursing home resident who's wanted the vaccine has had the opportunity to have them 2 weeks ago.
Senator, we appreciate your time and taking time to talk with us tonight. We'll further this discussion as we go on through the weeks. Thanks very much for being with us tonight. Senator Sean McCann is standing by in Kalamazoo. Senator, your take is going to be far different, obviously, from your Republican colleague, although you have adjoining districts down there. Let's talk a little bit about your take, first of all, from the speech.
Well, I think the governor set a really great tone, and she knows that the road ahead is going to be difficult. We have a divided power in Lansing, Republican legislature led and a Democratic governor. This is the deck of cards, the hands that got dealt to by the voters, and the voters, I think, expect that we have to find a way to work together. I think taking shots at each other is not a way that foments a good spirit of doing that work. I think what you've seen instead is you've seen good bipartisan work, but not everybody's always agreed, and the outcomes haven't always been to the satisfaction of either fully the governor or fully the legislature. As the governor noted, it's an extremely difficult situation to deal with, the hardest time probably anyone's ever imagined. We've learned as we've gone, and we've still got a road to go. But I think that at the end of the day so far, the legislature and the governor have done a good job of stepping up to deliver COVID relief into the hands of Michiganders, and our businesses that struggle have gotten relief. Our workers that struggle have gotten relief, and we know we need to do more. We've implored patience the whole time that this has gone on. And again, it's been really challenging times. But I think that the road ahead does look promising. To be able to put COVID in the rearview mirror and find ourselves moving forward from here is a really exciting prospect.
Well, you heard Senator Nesbitt, and I'm sure you could hear the frustration when he talked about feeling like the legislature has not really been at the table, hasn't been a partner in this from their perspective, talking about the lack of communication with the governor. Obviously, you're in the governor's party. That communication may be different on that side of the aisle, but have you felt any of that frustration that we hear Republicans talk about as a body not being maybe right at the table when those decisions are being made?
Well, I understand the frustration. It's a difficult situation. We are co-equal branches of government, and each has its powers and its abilities to do things. In this case, the governor and then the Department of Health and Human Services was granted power by the legislature to deal with pandemics in a way that could not probably be legislated easily. As you can see, in a dynamic like this, the ability to act quickly and with public health guidelines first and foremost, it's not exactly what the legislature envisioned, but they gave that power to the governor and the departments. And you have to wonder if the tune would be different if the governor was of another party sitting where she sits, but she's not. And so, it's on the legislature to pass bills and put those bills on the governor's desk, and for the governor to decide what to do with them and to try to have communication in the meantime. It's hard to figure out, where the first shot gets fired. But I think that at the end of the day, we know we've got to work together. We've got to take the temperature down. We've got to find where we can work together. And we've got to find a way to move forward through this pandemic. I just locally, I get chills when I see and hear the governor talk about Pfizer and the fact that it's the epicenter of hope. I want to put that on a T-shirt and wear that around with a Pfizer logo on it. We in our community are the epicenter of hope. And I can tell you, after having toured Kalamazoo vaccine clinics put on by the county health department, they are ready to go and ramp up and expand to take more doses and put those in arms. So it's lined up. The runway is there. We just need the doses, and then I think we can get beyond these fights and get back to helping Michigan recover.
Final question, Senator. The governor has asked for her COVID relief plan today. Republicans in the House laid out their own plan that had some differences, to be sure. And I know you guys haven't gotten into deep debate on it yet, but given what you know and where you are, do you feel like the legislature and the governor are going to be able to come together with some type of package to use this money, much of which is federal money that still has to be allocated, and some that could be pulled back if it's not spent by certain deadlines?
Well, we have to, and I think we will. It would be a dereliction of duty not to advance these relief dollars to where they need to go. And again, I mean, there's been some dust-ups. There's been dust-ups over the first couple of years. But at the end of the day, when faced with the need to do this, I think everyone has stepped up, sometimes grudgingly, and not always happy with the outcome. But that, again, is the bipartisan nature of what we're dealing with. It's the hand we're dealt, and I think we need to play the hand as best we can.
Senator, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for including me. Great to be with you.
Senator Nesbitt, we appreciate both of them being with us tonight as we wrap up this unusual state of the state in a very different circumstance for the governor. There was none of the kind of ceremony that goes around with it. But the message tonight was very clear. She says she wants to make sure that this bill that she introduced, the supplemental spending bill, gets passed. She wants them to do it right away. And there is now a second bill out there, and it is possible that these two will become the basis of what could be the finished product if there is negotiation and if the legislature and governor can actually work to this. She pointed out there have been some bipartisan moments, but there have been a whole lot of moments where there has not been any cooperation. And so now the question is, what happens to this particular case at kind of an important moment in this response to COVID, because a lot of that money would be used for vaccinations, or at very least making sure the vaccinations are getting used throughout the state. Some of that money is believed to, the governor believes, could make that vaccine process roll out more smoothly. Brian and Sue.
Well, Rick, it certainly seems like, based on some of the frustrations there just in the interviews that we just had, that gap still seems to be pretty wide, really. So a bipartisan effort could be fairly difficult, but clearly it is about recovering from the pandemic moving forward in the state.
Yeah, and I think you have to try to find that moment. What is the moment that says, okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to do this? It can't be, from my perspective, just one side saying, okay, this is how it's going to be. We're going to go along with whatever you say, one way or the other. There has to be that give and take. There has to be some cooperation. And Senator McCann talked about it. Look, it's divided government. Divided government requires compromise. Nobody's going to get everything that they want. And we're at a point now where the Republican-led legislature feels like they have been boxed out of this COVID response for the past 10 months or so. And now there's this opportunity where there's money. Some of that money will be out of the state coffers, but the vast majority of it is $5 billion or so is federal money that needs to be allocated. And the question is, how will they allocate it? And will there be strings attached? What will the legislature want from the governor to get that money out there? And what will the governor negotiate with the legislature on that front? Is there some room for both sides to work? And how does that cooperation come about? You look back at this last budget process, and it went by with almost no conversation. There was no outward sign that it wasn't going to happen. One of the smoothest budget processes we've seen in a long time, largely because there was plenty of federal money that was backfilling the budget, but also because having a budget battle in the middle of a pandemic is really bad optics. So they can find cooperation when they really need to. Question is, will this be one of those times when they think they really need to? And the governor, again, emphasized a number of times that she wants people to come together. I go back to that thing she said right at the end of the speech about fixing the damn road forward, which is a take on one of her campaign themes a couple of years ago. But she's talking about now going to every county in the state, as I took it, and trying to find common ground, even with people who didn't agree with her or don't agree with her or didn't agree with the outcome of this last election. That's kind of an interesting approach. We'll see how that rolls out. We'll also see what the take is from Republicans. Do you get any of those Republican lawmakers in some of those districts to join the governor, or is that even what she's looking for? But I think this is going to take some type of an effort to get people to move on. But the first thing the governor has to think about is how to get the legislature to move on along with her. And that was clearly one of the focuses tonight.
Yep. They don't want to leave that money on the table, that's for sure. And this all begins and ends with COVID. I got to get it fixed. Rick, thank you for your analysis and insight. We appreciate it.